Honestly, I think I would focus on two things, which, I was on a panel yesterday or 2 days ago, and the biohacker said gratitude. I think it's important to be grateful. You don't really miss your health or your lack of pain until you get sick and start having pain. And I think that the second thing is people need to embrace a certain level of autonomy and control. Like a lot of people are like, well, why didn't my doctor tell me? Or why didn't I know this? Or, they're sort of in this victim mode. But all in this day of AI and the internet, everyone has a very democratic access to information. And not everything works for everyone, placebo or effectiveness wise, but it behooves you just to learn more, right? Like just ideas are not a threat.
This is the Longevity Loop podcast, and I'm your host, Brent Wallace. In every episode, I bring you the leading voices in longevity, plus my own insights to put the world's best strategies directly into your hands, making elite longevity strategies accessible to everyone, regardless of your background. So let's jump into the loop starting right now. All right. So we are live. Welcome to the Longevity Loop, where we try to separate what actually helps you live longer from the expensive wellness theater, which we all know. What me and Dr. Park were just talking briefly right before we hit record. There's a lot of not great stuff out there, and so we're here to separate all the good stuff from the bad stuff. And this is a little opinionated, and it's totally cool. That's what we're all about. Get opinions, get some professionals on here like Dr. Park that actually knows his stuff, and we'll go from there. So my name is Brent, and today we're going to get into chronic pain. So I think a lot of us have either experienced chronic pain ourselves or known someone or been close to someone who's had that. So it's something that is debilitating to people. We know that, we've heard that. And so we're going to talk about what may actually restart the healing process here today with Dr. Park. And so before we get into that conversation, though, I just want to do a quick medical disclaimer reminder before the internet diagnoses itself into the comments. I'm not a doctor. Dr. Park is a doctor, but please check with your own personal physician. This stuff is tailored precision medicine for a reason. It's not just general medical advice. All this stuff is so tailored to your specific case, your genome, all of that stuff. So just don't take any advice we're doing. This is for entertainment purposes only. And so it's education. It's not personal medical advice, diagnosis, treatment. Nothing here creates a clinic-patient relationship. So just remember that when you hear all the great stuff we're about to talk to. So, Dr. Park, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
So let's talk about pain for a second, because that's clearly one of your specialties. And what do people get wrong about it? People have been in pain. So if someone's been in pain, for months, years, whatever it might classify as chronic pain, what are we getting so wrong about pain, what it is, and why it's still there?
Right. Pain is a neurological phenomenon. It's usually a signal from the body that something is injured, right? So the Marine Corps likes to say pain is weakness leaving the body. It's probably not that simple. It's more like pain is, hey, watch it, buddy. You're about to tear something that's already marginal. So interestingly, if you MRI people in their set, a lot of times their shoulder tendons, their rotator cuffs are not even connected anymore. So what does that mean? It means it was completely ripped apart. Why doesn't that hurt anymore? Because it's not even trying to repair. So in a lot of times, pain is the body's attempt to repair. But because of things that I talk about in all my books about stem cells and, telomere erosion, the local stem cells have copied themselves so many times. They've tried, but it's like photocopying something that's already damaged and blemished. It's not working. So if it's still trying, that's pain. If it's given up, that could be no pain, which is not necessarily a good thing. So in general, we like to see people's pain go away. I do exosome treatments like on shoulders, hips, knees, things like that. And a lot of times the pain will go away rather quickly. But I always warn people, don't exert it too much for a couple of months, because the new collagen that's being formed is not strong. It's like wet cement. So a lot of times, or a few times, we have to warn people, hey, don't do your personal best at 55 because the pain's gone away, but that's a weird artifact of what the exosomes are doing to make your cells regenerate. So pain is neither good nor bad, but chronic pain usually falls into categories which we know, a lot of people have back problems. The majority of us will have back problems. I'm actually 6 days into a cervical spine problem I did from too many push-ups. So that caused like a whiplash, a military neck. And for the first time in my life, I know what radiculopathy feels like. It's like a numbness going down the inside of my arm. So that's getting better slowly. I did some exosomes. I do some TA65. Oh, back pain is common. In other words, they get sciatica, the disc goes out of alignment, the whole spine goes out of alignment, causes pain shooting down. So people don't realize these are all in nerve distributions, right? They're maps that you can tell where the disc is slipped just by knowing where the numbness or the tingling is. There's also, pain from headaches. There's tooth pain, obviously dental problems, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow pain. What other kind of common pains? Migraine headaches can be cyclical. Yeah, that pain can come from anywhere, anytime, but probably people who are active, exercise, their knees hurt. This is from inflammation. It's not always like an itis, like rheumatoid arthritis or gout or something like that. A lot of time it's just the surfaces rubbing against each other and causing maybe water on the knee and effusion. So pain is the body's reaction to tell you to slow down. Hey, we're about to be injured or we are injured.
So it sounds like more of a signal that your body's like, hey, hey, cool the jets here, guy or
Yeah,
girl,
yeah.
and we need to heal this
In
before you
general.
go any longer.
In general. It's really because of inflammation a lot of times. So if you've ever heard of PRP, they'll take blood, they'll spin it down, inject it wherever, and it'll cause inflammation. They'll tell you don't take Advil, don't take Tylenol because we want inflammation. And that's a biohack, and it brings in your stem cells, and your, in my case, 58-year-old stem cells will release 58-year-old exosomes. So it's not quite as good as the newborn ones we use to cause dedifferentiation and healing.
Got it. So, uh, I mean, I want to talk about exosomes later for
Sure,
sure. So let's bookmark that because that's a
sure.
really important thing, especially with the healing process there. What I want to, establish before we kind of get into too much of the treatment side of thing is like, y- you know, pain. Where do you see the, you know, people are probably telling themselves a story, like you said, like, right, like the people that have the separated shoulders. And since it's like the body's stopped trying to actually repair itself there, that pain goes away, right? It's because it's like
Well,
the
that's long,
body's
long term, right? Like
okay.
if a 7-year-old said, "Oh, my shoulder used to be painful, but now it's not for 10 years," MRI them, it might not even be connected anymore. In other words, there's no more inflammation because the body stopped trying. Um,
And how much of that is a story that people are telling themselves about the pain that actually might miss what actually is going on, because we hear,
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of stuff about pain,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
take an Advil or whatever, and that dulls it, but that's actually not, that's just stopping the signal going to
Right.
your brain, right? That
Well,
actually not
what
stopping
you're
what's going on.
describing, you could be referring to malingering, which is people with drug seeking behavior wanting pain medication. And that's not common. Usually people are in pain and it's real. But pain can be of various types. It could be the organ itself, like the shoulder joint is all gnarled up, it's arthritic, bone on bone with bone spurs. It could be referred pain. In other words, if you get like right upper quadrant pain, that could be a gallstone, gallbladder, or something like that. It could be nerve pain. So sciatica is a classic one, shooting down the buttocks and the back of the leg. That's a nerve being irritated. So it could be nerve, it could be referred from visceral organs, or it could be the joint or tendon itself.
Got it. So it could be about the damaged tissue, like you said. Is there anything else that would, it could be something else though, too, right? It's not always just about the damaged tissue. It could be something if it lingers
Well,
long
I
enough
mean,
that,
like on a meta level, like some people have pain from like sexual trauma, so they can have painful intercourse. A lot of times, childhood adverse event could cause some kind of body keeping the score thing. Even perhaps we got to be open to past lives. If you had some weird, horrible thing in a past life, it might echo through into the present. But yeah, in general, it's not that difficult. If your elbow hurts, you probably have tendonitis. If your
yeah.
shoulder hurts, you probably have a rotator cuff or joint disease.
I know I had an uncle that had some chronic lower back pain, and I remember he'd always go into surgeries, right? And then it'd kind of fix it for a while, then it'd come back because, whatever was happening in his back. But he'd always talk about ghost pain, like, like even though the pain wasn't there, he'd still kind of feel it. Is that strictly psychosomatic, or is that something that the
I
body
mean, we
is
have to be
really
careful
reacting to?
about psychosomatic. It implies that it's kind of imaginary. But yeah,
Hmm.
like there was a book I've never read, but The Body Keeps the Score. So,
Yeah.
kids who spend a lot of time in the hospital, they're very traumatized. So they do what's called guarding. Guarding just means I'm ready for something awful to happen because my body remembers my spirit, my nervous system. So yeah, in general, like, I do a lot of nasal injections for people. And the first one, the fear factor is so high because there's a dude in my nose with a needle. So I usually go less. And then once you remove it, they're like, okay, there is an end. And the second side doesn't hurt as much. So a lot of pain is due to what we call central sensitization. So it's the mind, the prefrontal cortex, the spirit is remembering something. So yeah, definitely pain is all perceived in a biochemical electrical way. And so the hacks that I just learned from a patient the other day, the reason why I'm pressing the nose when I do the nasal injection is that the pressure is overrides the sharpness. And so it can kind of be transmitted faster. So we have a lot of tips and tricks, but yeah, it's, essentially electrical. It's real, but it is hugely mitigated, as you say, by your mental state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny, right? When you said that, is like, you're pinching your nose. It kind of reminds me of like in the culinary world, it's like put a lot of lemon juice on it to kind of get rid of the spiciness or
Mm.
and it's like something that you're like kind of changing things in the body to let it accept something else like there with that. So, can you explain to me just in the most simplest terms? So we hear the two pain terms, at least that I recall that I hear the most, is acute and chronic. So what's the difference in the body once it changes from acute to chronic, or what's kind of the differentiation there of what would be like, hey, this is a chronic pain I have, or this is just acute pain that I have?
Yeah, I mean, these are just vague time signifiers. So if something is like I have acute pain over the last 5, 6 days. If it lasts, at some point I can consider it chronic. So it's very subjective. It's whatever you want. But probably there's not a lot of difference between the signals that are going through the nervous system to your brain. It's just chronic pain starts to create, psychological overlay, suffering, sort of a patient identity. But it can, especially when mitigated with opioids, create secondary problems, psychological mood problems, sleep problems. Yeah. But it's just a arbitrary thing. Like, what do you consider a short time or a long time?
Okay. So it seems like it's just an arbitrary scale where it will tip into chronic if it's something that doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime soon, where acute, you probably
Yeah. I
expect
mean,
to.
it's just very subjective. You could say, oh,
Yeah.
chronic means more than a month. Or I could say chronic is more than 2 weeks. Or I could say chronic is more than 2 years. It's all context dependent, right? Yeah.
Yeah, got it, got it. So you just touched on something there that I was curious about. So you kind of alluded to that the our nervous system learns pain, right? And then part of what you're talking about, especially in your books, is that your body actually has to unlearn that, right? So even if you take the pain away, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding this here, but the system learns pain, takes on the pain, and even if you remove the pain, we still have to unlearn this, correct?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
it's a
I wouldn't
struggle to there?
I would say it's more like, I mean, listen, if you put your hand on a stove 5 times and got burned 5 times, then the sixth time you get close to the stove, your brain's going to be like, hey, whoa, watch it there. So it's just learning. It's adaptive learning, right? But I would say in most cases, unless you're talking about some psychological personality or malingering sort of drug seeking, pain is often real. And it's just a signal that something is injured, inflamed, or repairing. So we have to presume as doctors, good faith, that people are usually who say they're in pain are in pain.
Yeah, I guess that makes it a pretty tough thing. I don't know if you watched, I forgot all those documentaries that just recently came out about the Sackler family and the
Yeah, they pushed a lot
opioid.
of Purdue narcotics on us. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's a racket, a scam, just big pharma, military industrial. It's all the same
Yeah.
money.
And also the addiction part of it, right? So, I mean, that's real. Like if you're going to seek something for for your ailment, and then you get something that's addicting, and then all of a sudden you do have that drug addicting behavior and stuff, which is a super scary prospect. And I think that's always something that's kept me, when I've gone to dental to get dental work or anything, I've always stayed away from those because I'm super scared about, like, no, no, I'd rather be in pain or keep on taking Advil or whatever and just manage the pain a little bit more than, those addiction things there's. And I think it makes it confusing for health conscious people. They're trying to fix their pain, right? Like, you don't want to put something in your body that necessarily won't benefit you. But then if you're in pain, you want to get out of that pain, right? So that makes it
Yeah,
a,
well, I've only taken one Tylenol number 3 once in my life, but, it obviously, if you become dependent and tolerant and you get withdrawal, then that starts to look like opioid addiction, and that's a secondary problem, right? Then you have drug-seeking behavior, you have to come down, you have to get the fix. So, yeah, a lot of Americans did kind of fall into that. And now, in response, the regulatory agencies have mandatory opioid training. But yeah, you can spot drug seeking people a mile away. And it's sad because, they're just drug addicts. They need a fix. It's not that easy to
yeah,
get out of that. So, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's a bummer for sure. So when someone does start improving their pain, do you see different behaviors about how people are approaching it to fix it? Or I guess maybe another way to say it is, or just a slightly different way to say it is like, are people wasting their money, or what are people wasting their money on when they're trying to fix chronic pain? So if you have it, like, what's some things that are worthwhile and what things are just total rubbish? I mean, like we talked about
Right.
again.
Right. Well, it's a lot of times if there is a surgical cure, like let's say you have a nasty bone spur that's like sawing into your supraspinatus tendon, then a surgery is great because you no longer have that bone spur gnawing away and cutting your tendon. Likewise, if you have a terrible back misalignment and they can do Harrington rods, great. But, that is a Faustian bargain because you're reducing the mobility and setting up for multi disc disease above and below the fixation. So sometimes surgery, but I think in general, pain oftentimes is musculoskeletal. So like tennis elbow, torn rotator. And now that we have regenerative technologies like, stem cells, maybe PRP, maybe exosomes that can cure the problem, it's better to cure the problem than address the pain, right? Like I never understood why people would put lidocaine to test and see if a trigger point gets better. Well, it gets better, but then where are you 40 minutes later? You still have pain. So the body is screaming out for help. And so just covering up the symptoms with, relaxants or pain medication or, this horrible one, gabapentin, that's not the key. If you can do something to mitigate the origin, right? The offending organ, then do that.
Yeah. So what do good clinicians look for that most people might never think about? They're going to come into someone such as yourself who's good at this. What are you looking for that other doctors or clinics might be missing?
Well, AI is much better at diagnosing stuff than we are, but AI can't read intuition. It's like that old House MD show. People lie and they don't even know they're lying. So it's helpful to have experience with liars. So I guess my point is if I tell you, oh, I have neck pain, AI might say, "Oh, this is that and the other." It might not say, "Well, what started it? How long has it come? Is it constant? Is it intermittent? What triggers it? What makes it better?" The diagnosis is almost always in speaking to somebody and getting a clear history. A lot of times they can be confabulating and misunderstanding. So the thing that humans sometimes do well if they're listening is using intuition to get at what the key factors are, right? Because like me, maybe I did the push-ups and that caused the problem. Or maybe, I was born breech and someone ripped my head out and I have misalignment from birth, all that's very different. So getting at the history, the time course, does it come and go? What makes it better and worse? That really helps your diagnosis.
So it sounds like just taking a little bit more human approach to it and spending time with that.
Yeah, yeah, because the time sequence is super important, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm getting in a car accident tomorrow. That's not going to cause pain today. So you got to get the order of what happens and when it happens.
got it. So in your clinic there, LA, what patterns do you see over and over with people you've been dealing with for years? I mean, obviously, like you said, there's the human aspect of it that you're very much dealing with. What are the patterns that are really common that like, I would imagine you see people consistently over the years, right? I mean, you're solving their pain, but they're like, "Hey, Dr. Park was awesome at this. I'm going to come back because now I have a blown out knee from doing a
Yeah, yeah, for
marathon," or
sure. Like I got a
whatever it
guy
is.
coming in Thursday. He's like 6'3", 240, hockey player, 50 years old. I mean, 50-year-old should not be playing hockey. It's a high impact force thing, right? So this dude's torn off his pec major. He's gotten rotator cuff stuff. So what I've seen, to answer your question, is that a lot of people in their 50s, because of their understanding of who they are as a person, I'm a beautiful, active, healthy person. They don't give it up. They don't hang up their hockey skates. They don't hang up their yoga leotard, and they keep on pushing. And that's okay. You're going to get injured. So a lot of times, the majority of my patients are repeat customers. So you help their left knee. They're like, hey, next time you're in town, do my right hip. So it's like whack-a-mole. I just apply the spackle, and oftentimes your body responds and you keep on going. And I just got off the phone with a 50-year-old motocross guy. He hit a pothole while he was touring. I mean, that's not something that 50-year-olds do, but these days, like, they go kite surfing, jump out of airplanes. So we're just helping these Gen Xers and boomers stay active according to their fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is funny that, it seems like every decade I get older, it's like 30 is the new, or 40 is the new 30, and now 50 is the new 4, and I think there's some truth to that because I, because obviously there's technology and, even like hormone therapies and stuff that can keep you there. But there's also things that are going to be falling apart in your body. And much of that I feel is like your ability to heal and recover. And I'm sure that's something that you deal with because, like you said, with the exomes, it's like wet cement. Take your time, let it set. Don't try to go set some PRs on whatever. You gotta really allow time for recovery, rest, rejuvenation, like that. So when patients come and see you, I can imagine they're really relieved to find out that you understand their pain and their situations. So what are things that people are maybe trying to typically try too late in the process, and maybe things that they obsess over too early when it comes to, say, a repetitive stress injury? Because it seems like we're talking a little bit about athletes here, the motocrosser, the ice hockey player, these people that are just like trying to get the most out of their body. What are some signals that they might be getting, like that they're trying too late to diagnose or fix? Or maybe some things that they're obsessing about just too early, of like, oh man, that might be like something, my knees click in, or I mean, I don't know what it might be, but in your experience, what have you seen?
Well, I think people are largely in denial. When they look in the mirror, they see an 18-year-old, even if they're 80. And so, up until this point, we don't have great hacks for the gradual stem cell deterioration from telomere erosion and attrition. I just did last week a podcast about what causes aging. And so I've written books about that. But essentially, people are kind of in denial. So you wouldn't expect Pele or, Maradona, I don't know if he's alive, to be like taking the penalty kick. It's just like, this is a fundamental truism of being human at this time, is that your body's going to have problems if you try and act like an 18-year-old. But, if you do it on a low level, weekend warrior, you recover, eat well, good supplements, as long as you're cognizant of the fact that you're not 18 anymore, then you'll be okay. We can patch you up, put you back out in the field, you know. But it's not, the body wants to do what it thought it was doing when it was young. I mean, some of the injuries I've had, and I had to revise my aftercare. I had one famous actor, he was playing beach volleyball. His knees felt so good. And 3 hours of beach volleyball at 53 is not a great thing, right? And another guy, 56, he said, oh, doc, I feel like I have 18-year-old shoulders. And then next thing I know, he hurt his other shoulder because he did his personal best, in bench pressing. I'm like, you got to, be reasonable about what your body can do, because it's all accumulated damage, isn't it? I mean, even the weightlifters, the bodybuilders, you got to realize that those muscles attach by tendons and ligaments to bone. And if you're still like the Incredible Hulk, guess what? That connection of that muscle to the bone could just tear right off one day. And you're like, whoa, I'm so strong. How did that happen? Well, you're applying, forces that you could have done 20 years ago to tiny little attachments to bone. The math is not mathing. You don't expect to drive 180,000 miles on tires and have the same tires, right?
That's funny you mentioned that. I was just thinking in my mind, I'm like, it's just like a car with like new tires or something. It's like,
For
hey,
sure.
it's the ball joints that are like,
Yeah.
going to give you issues. It's not, yeah, you got some great rubber there, but at the same time,
Yeah,
you
I
got to
mean,
take
luckily
those
the
corners
body's better
carefully.
than a car because it actually has stem cells that do actually regrow every organ in our body. Does it always keep up? No, especially in times of accelerated damage. But there's just that fundamental grind of aging, right? I always consider the drying machine, right? The lint trap. You ever done a laundry and there hasn't been lint in the lint trap? So just say, like, if you keep on washing your stuff until the end of time, there's not gonna be any more sheets eventually, right? That's just the logic.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah, I know, I'm shocked at our lint trap sometimes, like, "Where did all this come from?" But yeah, it's coming
I
from
know
here.
it looks like your sheets are the same, but they're not. There's that much lint minus your sheets, right?
Right? Yeah, that'd be a funny thing. You weigh your lint and weigh your sheets and see how light they get if they get
I'm
that.
guessing they're pretty equivalent. Yeah.
So let's talk about your clinic. What kind of patient do you feel especially best at helping? I mean, because you obviously do more than just pain here. You're partly longevity clinic, which how you got on my radar, or and vice versa. Because the longevity angle, which is what I love talking about. You've got the pain angle, and you've talked about exomes, which is also a huge longevity component with just like helping your body do that. What kind of patients do you feel best helping?
Well, you know, I was just at a conference this weekend, right? And there's this great manufacturer of exosomes. There's another one I know, she white labels her exosomes and they charge so much money. But at the end of the day, they're smart. Like I'm dumb. I'll just charge a tiny margin and I'll do multiple areas. So I like to think I've always run nonprofits with my businesses, not on purpose, but I just don't like overcharging. I have like literally four billionaire patients and they pay the same as Joe Schmo, right? And sometimes they even stiff me, which is very bad. So I need to start charging beforehand. But yeah, I would say the main thing is that if people, they'll sometimes, I know a buddy of mine gets a like $90,000 check to take care of you for a year, and he might put out like 30,000 of product to help you, right? This subscription base. Now, I've only had long-term patients, like, my mom is like whack-a-mole spackle. She's gotten 44 treatments, but it's wherever something hurts, we treat it and it usually goes away. One time, this wacky biohacker, he's like 80 now, he just wanted a high dose every month. So over the course of 2.5 years, he did like 20 treatments. And to be honest, he got younger because even though he was feeling fine, he just kept with the program. And in the last exam, and I talk about this in my podcast, Recharge Biomedical, just about 3 weeks ago. There's one actress, she was in the Killer's video, Mr. Brightside, Miss Atomic Bomb, and starred in Coyote Ugly. I met her not even 2 years ago, and she got like 14 treatments over 18 months, started menstruating after 8 years of menopause, which is
Whoa.
crazy. Yeah. And then her vascular system totally revamped. When she took baths, she used to get a headache because of poor circulation. We couldn't even stick her. And now she started a new romantic relationship. She's starring on Dances with the Stars, and she's living her best life despite huge personal stresses. And I just feel like she got at least 8 years younger. So if people were willing to commit, which nobody is, even the billionaires, if you were to do a high dose every month for like a year, it might cost you 70,000 or something. But you know, you do get changes that you wouldn't expect just from trying to knock out a knee pain or shoulder pain, yeah, that's easy. But if you're really trying to get younger, then very few people commit to chronic high dose exosomes. And high dose is very relative. I mean, what we give you is like a drop in the bucket, like literally a drop in a giant bathtub, but it moves the needle a lot of times.
Yeah, so is there any downside to that? Especially if money were no object, that sounds like something too good to be true.
I mean, there's theoretical risk of cancer, so we never give it to people with cancer because a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's a little toxic to your bank account, but if you got multiple yachts in Dubai or whatever, you probably should try it. Uh, the downside is you have to pay more taxes because you live longer. That's a thing. Uh,
Yeah?
but no, I think it's relatively safe. Like my 80-year-old guy, he hadn't had an erection in 6 years, and we did like multiple, like 15 penis injections. Now he's got strong erections. And more impressively, his body is repigmenting. So his hair from his legs up to his scalp is turning black at the roots. So he thinks that's prima facie evidence of getting younger, but who knows?
Wow. That's pretty incredible. And it's just those local injections that are having those whole body effects on him? Or
No, we
is he
do IV nasal. So, his brain's sharp. That goes to the brain. I just did a nasal shot on Saturday because I was feeling a little bit sluggish and anxious. So that's one of our more popular things. It balls up the olfactory nerves that gets into the brain. That's something that I know, Dave Asprey, he's gotten a few of those. He really likes it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's super cool. So what do you think people misunderstand about, you hear a lot about PRP, you're starting to hear a lot more about exomes. There was NK exomes that I've just heard about recently, the natural killer exomes that are supposed to be really good with, like you referred to cancer could be a potential side effect, but supposedly these ramp up your natural killer cells and actually help with cancers or
Yeah.
people with
Okay. So
cancers.
let's disambiguate that a little bit, not to be an AI, but so people don't realize that your main defense against cancer is cell suicide, right? So when the chromosome number is bad, the cell will kill itself. Okay. But then downstream of that, we have the immune system. So we've known since the AIDS epidemic that when people's immune system is bad, they'll get rare cancers. But that generalizes to all of us. So part of the reason why older people get more cancer is because their immune system no longer functions. So as we get through, as I talked about last week's webinar, the oldest recent woman, well, there's a Japanese 119, but this 160-year-old woman only had two types of T cells to fight new threats being virus, cancer, whatever. You and I probably have 10,000 blank keys to attack new threats. So in the immune system, when you get a cancer, your immune system can sometimes recognize that and destroy it. That's active immunity. That's cytotoxic T cells, CAR T or chimeric antigen receptor T cells, right? People pay a lot of money and it doesn't kind of really work that well. The NK is natural killer. That's just like it sounds. It naturally kills cancer. How? We don't know. Gene rearrangement and specific targeting is maybe less of a factor. So what you're suggesting, and I think is probably true, is that you have natural killer cells and whatever they're secreting is part of the formula to destroy, generally speaking, cancers. So I have not seen or used exosomes from natural killers, but there's no reason why that wouldn't work. So what we just learned only 20 something years ago was that what was coming out of cells, this little tiny invisible bubbles, 100 nanometer, wasn't poop. It was actually communication. So now they're trying to learn how cells communicate with these invisible bubbles. And the answer is a lot of, proteins, mRNA, but a lot of microRNA, which are blockers of mRNA. So anyway, the field is kind of young, but they're learning. And yeah, it turns out that what they thought was poop was actually the cell's meaningful communication. And this is true for all plants and all animals.
That's crazy. Yeah, because my understanding of it is, very rudimentary, but that's how those exomes work. It's actually the communication that's facilitating, not necessarily you're injecting something into the body that actually is healing the body. It's actually injecting communication, I
Right, right.
guess,
Which is
or
why,
something along those.
yeah, which is why I was on a panel with a biohacker and they were asking about supplements. The problem with the supplement argument is that it has to be absorbed past the gastric acid and into the intestines. And you get a loss of payload or yield, right? So just because you're taking something by mouth doesn't mean some people inject, but then it has to get through the bloodstream and go to the cells of target or of desire. So at the end of the day, we're just a collection of trillions of cells, and the cells are communicating, they're doing their thing, they're interacting. So if you can mitigate cell behavior, that's a little more efficient because you don't have to absorb and distribute. And so if you see on the cover of my book, you can see the exosome, which is literally invisible. When I melt a vial, it should be clear. If it's not, I know something's above 200 nanometers. We think it docks with the target cell and releases these notes. That's why I call the analogy songs of healing. So if you do an analysis, there's mRNA, there's microRNA. And I think a lot of what we're doing is microRNA, which is a very short 22 base pair sequence, which gums up the expression of certain messenger RNAs. So stay with me. Like most of your cells are adult, mature, not acting primitive. So if you block that for a short time, they can act primitive and be more stem-like and regenerate. And I think that's how a lot of the nature has intended our repair system to work. We don't leave it on all the time because we don't want to grow to be huge and, like a giant jellyfish in the sea, if you will. So everything is kind of kept adult and limited. But for a short time, the body has this hack where it'll get the inflammation, send the stem cells, secrete the exosomes, and then the local cells in your tendons or cartilage will act younger and regenerate. And that's how we think it's working.
So I know there's a lot of talk, especially longevity circles, about senolytic protocols, right? So taking fistin, spermidine, stuff like that. How does that complement, or is that different, or is that along the same
Okay,
lines of what
great question. I'm
exomes
glad
would
you
be
asked
doing?
that. I'm glad you asked that. So I write about in the books the three Hindu gods. They have Trimurti, three forms. Shiva, destroyer, that's a senolytic, right? Like a cell dying or being killed. Vishnu, which is the maintainer, that's like the telomerase activator I've taken for 18 years. It keeps the stem cells from aging by turning on the reverse transcriptase telomerase and keeping the stem cells long in their telomeres. And then Brahma, which is the creator god. So we all come from one fertilized egg. All our cells all come from that one fertilized egg. Stem cells are Brahma, the creator. So I think the real hack is in the latter two senolytics. I've taken Foxo 4 DRI, but basically, senolytics are a Faustian bargain, right? So if you kill something, do you have something to replace it with that's just as good or better? Perhaps not as you get older. If you have a lot of, I'll never forget this one billionaire patient of mine. He had boy in the bubble syndrome as a 1 year old. He was literally in a bubble, had combined immune deficiency. And so as a 30-year-old, he came to see me and his telomeres measured like a septuagenarian. We gave him the TA65, and then he came back to like a 20-year-old. So he had just gotten a lot of his immune system. His T cells were stuck in that age thing that he had suffered as a 1 year old. And as a result, system was acting like an old person. He got a lot of colds and flus. But we were able to scrub that. But luckily, he was young enough that his stem cells could replenish a younger version of an immune system. But if you're talking about this Dutch lady, 116, and you wipe out with senolysis her only two cells, she got no immune system. So the real hack is not going to be in senolysis because that's always a Faustian bargain. It's going to be in stem cell banking and learning how to differentiate them. So my 25-year-old and I went to Costa Rica. I gave a lecture in their stem cell clinic, and he's seriously thinking of investing his money to bank his 25-year-old stem cells. Because in 30, 40 years, if he needs a kidney, God forbid, or whatever, then because stem cells from yourself are largely similar, if not identical, it doesn't have that organ rejection thing, which is something that people don't understand about stem cells. If you fly to Costa Rica or Panama and you get someone else's stem cells, your body will likely destroy them in 2 or 3 days. During those 2 or 3 days, they'll secrete a lot of great exosomes. To my way of thinking, why even bother with this immune incompatibility? Just get non immunogenic exosomes from a newborn baby because they're so small and they don't have these proteins that identify you from me. So you think you're healing like a newborn baby again.
Yeah, it seems like exomes is like definitely the next step in that evolution of healing versus PRP or stem cells or stuff like that.
I mean, they all work by the same final common pathway, which is the exosomes. So,
Yeah, so I've heard you mention TA65 a couple times. You said in that second stage of that, and that has to do with telomeres. What is TA65 for those that might
yeah,
not have heard of that before?
yeah. So a year or two before that, I had learned about telomerase. I wanted to know why people age. So I wrote a science fiction graphic novel, screenplay. And then a year later, 777, like the slot machine, they came out with this product, TA65, which I've taken for 18 years. No other supplements. So it's really kept the reading glasses away. I could read this close. Dr. Park's book offers a clear and friendly account. So at 58, almost 59, I should have reading glasses, but it's kept the stem cells that make the lens soft. So the stem cells have stayed around. Likely, I have a little bald spot which I need to eject, but it's all pretty black. I got some snow coming up here. So I think that is really why I've stayed relatively younger. So it's basically a single molecule from a Chinese longevity herb. They probably modify it. It's obfuscated in the patent, but it's something that people have taken, hundreds of thousands of people. I've taken it for 18 years. I think it helps. Not cheap. There are generic versions on Amazon. I'm not sure about the bioavailability of it, but I do think that's a good one for the Vishnu, for the maintenance of your stem cells.
Yeah, I remember the first time that came across my radar. There, I forget his name, but he's the guy from Detroit that always competes with Brian Johnson in the Rejuvenation Olympics.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
forget. I forget his name, but but that's one of his secrets. He's like, I eat cheeseburgers, whatever, and I'm beating this guy that's spending millions of dollars on
It's
his.
a good one. Yeah. I mean, that's how I met Dave Asprey. He asked me like 15 years ago, hey, is this stuff legit? And then he took it and they did the generic for a while. So yeah, I think it is legit.
That's
Seems to
cool.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard, I've never taken it myself, but I've definitely heard about it.
Mm.
So, Dr. Park, how are most people finding you today in your clinic? What brings them to you for the first time? Is it just
Yeah.
hearing yourself on podcasts, or they find you like
Great
putting
question.
in like best doctor in Los
No,
Angeles, or
I don't pay to play for those best doctor magazines. No, most of them are friends and family of people we've treated and helped. That's the primary source. But some people subscribe to the YouTube channel, and this is the 1 year anniversary of my podcast. In 52 weeks, we've done 45 episodes. So we do
Nice.
like a kind of functional medicine thing. So we talk about like, autism, Alzheimer's, EMF poisoning, gut dysbiosis. So a lot of the fringe topics that as doctors and as patients, we are not getting a lot of from the mainstream medical profession. So that's been kind of my mission over the last year, and that continues to expand. We'll be doing biological dentistry next week, I think, and
Very cool.
medicinal psychedelic mushrooms. We'll talk about that with an expert. So,
Also very
yeah.
cool. Yeah, we've dealt with a lot of the psychedelic stuff with Spanner
Mm,
that we've talked about that quite a bit, which is super, super interesting. And then also just with the biologic dentist too. Like I've been seeing a biological dentist for a few years, and it's amazing how thorough and different an experience that is to
yeah.
go
No, I
through,
have a
and
lot of
especially
respect for them because basically, like everything that they were taught as dogma is kind of up for question now, like
yeah,
from fluoride all the way down to root canal. And it's hard to hold space with, ideas that like maybe we are just drug pushers for big pharma. We're not preventing disease. So that's why I really like regenerative medicine because it takes the focus off, just pushing more and more drugs into like trying to get at the root cause.
yeah, yeah. I saw a dentist from Germany. His name is Dr. Dome. That's his nickname. I forget his actual name, but yeah, I mean, he's kind of someone that's really addressing that and helping train a lot of dentists. But I feel it's just with all medicine, like you said, there's so much dogma, and then the big pharmaceutical industrial complex that is doing all this. And not to say that there's not some good to it, but it also keeps people stuck in the dark ages. I feel like a lot of times
Well,
because
yeah.
they have
It takes a lot
some.
of courage to deviate from your profession and be an outlier. Like this week's podcast is Dr. Armin, whose son is profoundly autistic from age 2. So over the last 15 years, he's had to unlearn and learn other things about autism. And, for the mind to hold the dissonance that vaccines can sometimes injure, but there may be a benefit, a lot of people collapse under the cognitive dissonance. But we have to be
Yeah.
open minded about a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, open-mindedness, courageousness, like you said, and then also the thing that's probably scary for a lot of practitioners, clinics, doctors, is that if you're not doing everything just to the exact order of the CDC, opening yourself up to liability, which is probably one of the most scary
Well,
things,
yeah, I mean, listen, you get out of bed, you break 18 laws, you're a criminal, you know? Like, I met this woman last year, such a twit. She was happy and bragging about how the fact she was the one who came up with the 6-foot social distancing. She was at the CDC.
God.
And I go, "Well, what research? What was that based on?" She goes, "Well, I saw a Twitter post." So literally your public policy came from some dimwit who just retweeted something. So, I mean,
Yeah.
this profoundly affected children and social skills and connectivity. So this is the level. I mean, in California, we had AB 2098, which was COVID disinformation law, two poorly worded paragraphs saying any doctor that spreads COVID disinformation is subject to review, you know. And so that's hugely fascistic. But most of the people who use the word fascist are the most fascist of all. And they're just like, believe what I believe. Otherwise, you're a threat to my mental health. So it was
Yeah.
tough. It was tough. I mean, there was one guy who was a total idiot, this Indian epidemiologist from Stanford. I remember thinking, man, you got a death wish out there. And now, years later, he's head of Health and Human Services. It's very rare that people will put their neck out to say what they think is the truth. But to tell a doctor that you can't even advise your patient anything against a corporation's will is nuts. So
Yeah.
luckily, the Supreme Court of California rescinded that. But it is a
Yeah.
scary time.
I remember that even that misinformation turned into malinformation, which is like information that's true but not helpful for or whatever. You're like, this is bonkers. Like, really, you can't even say
It's really bad.
the
I
truth
mean,
now.
yeah,
Like,
it's very
so
bad. Like doctors who were advising the COVID vaccines, I doubt any of them bothered to look at the safety data. And I remember as an OBGYN, when I saw that the American College of OBGYN took $4 million to recommend it for all pregnant women, I was like livid. I can't believe we don't even give aspirin, let alone like Zofran to pregnant women. And to do an experimental vaccine, and
yeah.
it's just really nuts.
Yeah, it is a really crazy time, and it's just a crazy time for. I mean, that's the whole thing about the longevity thing is like, it's clearly medicine that is helping people. There's just no way, shape, or form that you can deny that. Same thing with peptides or all these things, but since it's not like this FDA umbrella approval or the CDC doesn't recommend it, it's just poo pooed, and you're just like, this is crazy. This is not how it should be, and it's just a real shame. But touching on, what is something that you're doing that you're explaining to people that still feels harder than it should be when you're explaining something to someone, like a lot of times it's really hard to wrap, someone who's not in it like me and you day to day. It's really hard for some people that want to improve their health, but to really wrap their head around like, wait, like metformin, or I mean, just as an example, but there's just so many things that are used off label or quote unquote experimental, like exosomes, for instance, it's like, it's still like something that's considered, it's not covered by insurances that I know of yet. So what part of explaining these things feels harder than it should be to people coming in your door?
No, I think people are smart and they're curious and they're critical thinkers. The problem is that we have two big ideas. One is that aging is part of the system. It's a feature. It's not a bug, right? And the second is everything has a certain placebo effect. So if you believe something's going to help you, 20 to 30%, it will help you, which means that our consciousness, our state of mind, our expectations can create reality to a huge extent. But to answer your question about what's difficult, people don't really get that we're made up of cells. That's really, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, the core engine of aging, of health. So we're not really in charge. We're just like the home to these colonies of cells that are conspiring to keep us healthy or not healthy. And that's really the realization from a lot of these, tens and tens of thousands of studies. Exosomes from somebody with liver cirrhosis that's getting better, it can help somebody with liver cirrhosis that's not. And if you get exosomes from somebody who has breast cancer, it can cause pre-cancer of the breast in another person. There's all kinds of signals that are good and bad that we can't really even understand. It's like there's songs of healing or disease, but we have no ears. So how are we going to understand the music? I do think it's largely cellular based. That's my intuition. That's my theory. So a lot of times people think, well, it's down to my genes or my lifestyle, or it's probably not unless you have a double gene deletion or, a serious heterozygous gene deletion. So all these things that people are doing might help a little bit. You're measuring this, that, and the other. I was on a panel with a biohacker. He measures everything all the time, and he's got a Whoop. He's got a Aura ring and a third one, and he says, "Oh, they all disagree with each other." I'm like, "Yeah, that's how it works." So at the end of the day, if you're above ground and you're not in pain and you're relatively happy, that's a state of bliss. Like you're lucky because a lot of people, like you said, are in chronic pain. Good news, bad news, we can mitigate a lot of the chronic pain by tricking these cells into getting younger and repairing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, that's a good way to talk about it. It's like, hey, if you're you're above ground and happy, that's a lot of the battle
No,
there.
dude. I mean, look what's going on in Tehran and Israel. I mean, people looking at like no running water, no toilets, no electricity. Like that's real. And somehow we sleepwalk backwards into this delusion by believing what the government had to say on all sides. These people are on autopilot. They're not making good decisions. It's pretty
Yeah,
bad. I'd hate
yeah,
to
it's
be
really
in Tel
unfortunate.
Aviv tonight. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, I feel like there's these things. It's like, why can't we keep the whole world healthy and happy? It seems like that'd be a lot easier than keeping everyone in a state of misery and shock and all that. But
Because they're stuck in this story, right? It's like this, like, we have the story, we have this plan, we gotta see the plan through, like, and this weird flirtation with eschatology or at the end times, prophecy. I was kinda nutty, to be honest, but if you're locked into a mission for your whole life, it's kinda hard to give it up, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess that's just like coming, like you just mentioned, stuck. If you're stuck in that story, or that's just like reoccurring. Again, like just bringing it back to the pain is like if someone's stuck in their health story, it's a lot of the same, right? So like,
Can be,
so
yeah. I mean, I find psychiatry interesting because, like, people, a podcast host asked me, where would I go back to if I could go back, like, Marty McFly or whatever. And I said, I'd go back to 10 months. And they're like, how do you even remember 10 months? I'm like, I don't, but I have some understanding of what happened. But like, that's what makes the human experience so fun too. It's like all this perceived trauma, we're invited to alchemize it from lead, weighing us down into gold, something universally true. So that's kind of what's interesting. Maybe Ethan Hawke was waxing on the Colbert Show about life after death. Maybe he was right. Like maybe we're just projections of some larger intelligence playing with itself and experiencing itself. So maybe we don't die. I don't know. But
Yeah, I like Ethan Hawke. I heard an interview with him, not on Colbert, but he's a cool dude. He seems like a really cool guy. So, what do you think? Is it the right interventions that we're giving to people, or is it just changing how the system is responding, or maybe a little bit of both there to get people on the right
honestly,
track?
I mean, 50 years from now, I hope instead of funding drones and missiles, they'll be funding like people to freeze their placentas when they're born, because that's a source of genetically compatible replacement organs. I think that should be a human right. And then I go to these conferences for stem cells and exosomes. Scientists are getting so good at differentiating and understanding the ecology at a superficial level. So, like, there was a guy I met in Hong Kong who cured diabetes. 7 out of 7. He just took a cell, de-differentiated, made it into a pancreatic cell, and put it in the rectus sheath, and it cured 7 out of 7 people. And their ability to make specific organ types is just it's crazy. They're literally playing God. They can make sperm and eggs without you donating sperm or ovulating. It's crazy. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool things you can do. Bespoke cancer vaccines. They can figure out what genes are missing in your cancer and replace them. Like this is all better use of our money than
Yeah,
bombing each other into the Stone Age, in my opinion. I could
yeah.
be
Well,
wrong.
even just like some of the stuff coming out with like the eyesight interjections, where they put the virus into your eye and then and then stick it. What is it? I don't know exactly the
Yeah.
mechanism,
No, you gotta be
but
careful though. Whenever you're doing genetic engineering, you gotta be a little careful because it's always inadvertent downstream consequences. So
yeah.
I like to trust as much as I can the existing system.
So, Dr. Park, I'm going to try something new here on this episode today. So, we're just going to do a quick pattern interrupt, no nuance, just for about 60 seconds. So, the answers are needle mover, overhyped, or needs more context. And I'm just going to say a couple things. Peptides for pain, needle mover, overhyped, or needs more context.
The needle mover,
Okay. What about stem cells and regenerative interjections?
also a needle mover.
Okay. And what
But
about
having said
stretching?
that, you need context because you don't know how viable the stem cells are when you thaw them. They could all be dead, depending on the handling.
Right. The quality matters here. We'll just assume that all these things are high quality because same thing with peptides, right? Like you can get some bunk peptides out there, that are just like,
Yeah, I
just
mean, it's not that easy. It's not that hard to manufacture, but it's like a stepwise thing. It's really interesting. I interviewed Adam Bender, who makes them, so you can learn more about them.
cool. Adam Bender, what company is he from?
Forget the name of it, but he's been
Okay.
doing it for a while. Yeah, so go to the Recharge Biomedical podcast on YouTube.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll make sure to check out that. And then just last one, stretching more mobility routines.
That's great. That's the best. I wish I could do my yoga right now. My neck is kind of, yeah, that's the best. You got to stretch it. Yoga, Tai Chi, so good.
Oh man, I've been doing
10 years.
qigong for the last 6, 7 months.
Amazing.
Obviously similar to Tai Chi, and yeah, it helps. And then yeah, just this morning I felt a little tightness in my chest. I got on my foam roller and just kind of did this for about 8 minutes. And I was just like, oh man, it feels so good.
Yeah, it's a privilege to be alive. Definitely.
So let's land the plane here. We've spent some time, covered some really cool subjects here, and I really appreciate your time, Dr. Park.
Sure. My
So
pleasure.
if someone's listening to this right now and realizing they might be stuck in a loop, what's a smarter next conversation they should be having with their either PCP, primary care physician, or if they're fortunate enough to have a doctor such as yourself or longevity provider out there, what kind of conversation should be having?
Honestly, I think I would focus on 2 things, which, I was on a panel yesterday or 2 days ago, and the biohacker said gratitude. I think it's important to be grateful. You don't really miss your health or your lack of pain until you get sick and start having pain. And I think that the second thing is people need to embrace a certain level of autonomy and control. Like a lot of people are like, well, why didn't my doctor tell me? Or why didn't I know this? Or, they're sort of in this victim mode. But all in this day of AI and the internet, everyone has a very democratic access to information. And not everything works for everyone, placebo or effectiveness wise, but it behooves you just to learn more, right? Like just ideas are not a threat. So yeah, keep your mind open. If you want to learn some free hacks, Hay House paid me to write this book. So in this, I compare good health to like a six-cylinder engine. So there's hacks that are evidence-based to increase telomerase activity, in your movement, like you're doing qigong, your diet, what works in terms of Mediterranean, even breathing exercises, sleep, mindset. This this is all free, and you can learn to be a biohacker at a core fundamental level. I think it's so much better rather than teaching algebra or U.S. state capitals. They should teach kids how to sleep and eat and breathe. But they don't. They're just breeding consumers.
Yeah, with my 5-year-old, I've been trying to teach him to breathe. We call it the snake breath, like breathe in and then, like to, just making it fun for kids there.
Oh my
But
God, breath work is like the infinite hack, and nobody teaches it. Nobody knows it. I mean, it's something we do all day, every day, and yet who does it consciously?
well, it's just like that thing is like, you get frustrated in traffic or if you're playing soccer, you miss a goal or whatever. And it's just like, if you just have the consciousness and presence from that practice to remember to breathe in that moment of like, it's just like, there you go.
So
It's
important.
just way to go. So for someone that might not be LA based, I mean, do you do telemedicine or are you just local
I mean,
to
I have
LA?
licenses in Texas, Utah, New York, Florida, and Hawaii also. So I do get
Nice.
around quite a bit. So
Nice.
I'm sure there's somewhere that a US based person could meet me. Yeah.
So if people don't have access to someone like you, what questions do you think they should be asking their clinicians to know that they're in the right place to get the type of medicine that they
No, I mean,
need?
their doctor is not gonna know anything. They're just busy. So it's really like I said, you gotta be a quarterback. You gotta aggregate, weigh, vet the information on your own. And yeah, not everyone's gonna have peptide benefits or H-spot benefits. Not even you don't even need that. But I just bring it back to gratitude. Like if you're even in a place where you're pain free and you're living your life and maybe you have some worries and anxieties, but that's a pretty good state of health, actually. It could be
Yeah.
much worse. And, one of my good friends is having a struggle with cancer and she has a fentanyl patch max dose. I mean, these are real problems that people have, chronic pain in that form without a clear path to resolution. Believe me, it could be much better. It could be much worse. So people should just be very abundant and appreciative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like you said, it's like it could be much better, but it could also be much worse. Both things can be true at the same time, and
Yes.
we
Yes.
always, hold that. But I think what you're saying is be grateful for what we have in the moment now.
Yes.
And that's really the most important thing that we can do. Even if you do have a bum knee or whatever, it's still like, I remember seeing this study, and maybe you've read about this too, but that someone, I think it was like someone that was missing an arm in some horrible accident, and and it was bad for a while there, but then all of a sudden their happiness kind of came back up to a certain
Yeah.
level there, right?
We're so
And
adaptable. It's crazy. Yeah.
yep. And that's just the thing to keep in mind here, is like no matter what ailments, whatever you're facing in the moment, be grateful for what you do have and, and try to create that as your baseline and try to get to that. So with all that, like I got to check out your book that you just showed, the one you got from Hay House, the
The Term of Miracle.
telomeres.
Yeah, yeah. I got 3
That
major
sounds cool.
nonfictions. Yeah, this was the original about TA65 and telomerase. That's my stem cell theory of aging. This one is just normal hacks you can do to stay healthy without spending a dime.
Yeah.
And this is my most recent one about exosomes. And they can learn more at rechargebiomedical.com or my YouTube channel, DRPARK65. I put out weekly content, mainly just interviewing experts and learning new things for the audience.
Awesome. So let's make sure people know where they can find you again. So
Biomedical,
rechargemedical.com, biomedical.
rechargebiomedical.com. Yep. And my YouTube channel, I'm also on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, is the Recharge Biomedical Podcast or DRPARK65.
Okay. And that's your YouTube handle. Okay, cool. Well, everyone, thanks, Dr. Park. I really appreciate that. Everyone that you've been listening to that, send this to someone that you know who is a health obsessed person in your life who really needs it, and they'll love it. So subscribe to our podcast, The Longevity Loop. If you're a medical provider, check us out. Our marketing company is longevityclinicmarketing.com, where we help providers. And then Spanner, SPANNR.com, is our longevity directory, where you can find doctors such as Dr. Park and all kinds of longevity articles. If you're curious about what something is or want to know about red light therapies, cold plunges, it's all there and all science backed. So thanks so much, Dr. Park, for joining us.
Thanks so much,
and
Brett. Appreciate you.
That will sign off.
Okay, thanks. Have a great day.
This is the Longevity Loop podcast.